Well, let's go ahead and read a very short reading this morning. I think probably the shortest since in my 6 months of being here, which admittedly is not that long, but a very short reading this morning from God's Word. But let's do that. Let's start again in chapter 20. We're going to read the first two verses, and then we'll read these two commands. Then God gave the people all these instructions. I am the Lord your God, who rescued you from the land of Egypt, the place of your slavery. And then down to verse 12. Honor your father and mother. Then you will live a long, full life in the land the Lord your God is giving you. You must not murder. And there it is, the word of the Lord. Well, let's talk about this first commandment, commandment number 5, command of honoring parents. And I picked out like the one good picture of me and my daughter. Not really. This was a silly one, so I decided to throw it in. I thought of getting like a stock, image online of parents playing with their children. I thought, that's not real. That's not, I want something real, so I decided to go with a goofy picture of me and my daughter together. Because I love my children, right? But of course, what do we all want as parents? Like, you parents have been waiting this whole series to talk about, finally we can talk about children obeying and honoring their parents. That's right. Listen up, kids. Well, that's not really where I'm going with the sermon this morning, as you'll find out. But I want to talk about first, what does it mean to honor? Or what is this word conveying? What are we trying to get across here? And I think one of the things that we need to understand about these laws, first and foremost, is that they're not actually meant for kids, not for little kids. These are meant for adults. These laws were given to adults. And you might ask yourself how I'm coming to that conclusion. Well, here in a couple weeks, we're going to look at things like not committing adultery. How many 5-year-olds do we know need to be given the command, hey, don't commit adultery? Not very many of them, right? Right? Yeah. Or not murder. I mean, how many 3-year-olds need to be told, hey, don't go murder somebody today? Maybe don't hit your brother or sister. Right? These are not meant for little kids. These are meant for adults. And so we have to understand them in that context. We have to understand this one also in that context. If this isn't a word to 10-year-olds, then how is it a word to 30-year-olds? Or to 40-year-olds? Or to 50-year-olds? And some of you are in those camps this morning. What does it mean for you to honor your parents at the age that you are now? That's an important question that we need to ask. And I don't really think there's any doubt that these commands are first and foremost given to adults. But as we're going to look at more in a minute, it was the responsibility of parents to pass on and interpret these laws for their children. I don't think children are exempt from hearing them. But first and foremost, they're given to adults. And that doesn't mean that little kids, my kids included, ought to be allowed to say whatever they want, whenever they want, and however they want, or to just be completely disobedient to their parents at any time that they want. But rather, I think what God has in mind is the idea that when a person grows, that when a child grows older, that they take care of their parents. They honor them by taking care of them, because the elderly among you still have value. And this is actually something that I think our society has forgotten, to our own detriment. And I'm not purposely, let me say this up front, with what I'm about to say, I'm not purposely trying to upset anybody who may have already found yourself in this situation, but as Christians, we have to rethink how to make this apply to us. Because again, it's not just for little kids. I don't even think it's primarily for little kids. It is for those of us who find our parents in situations now that they have grown older. In our society, we're very quick to discard the elderly among us. We move them into nursing homes, into other care facilities, and we assume that they're okay because, well, they're with other people. Why wouldn't they be okay, right? But the truth is, study after study after study has proven that those who are moved into facilities like this end up very lonely. Now, that's not everybody, right? I don't want to paint with too broad a brush. But this has come up again and again, that they're lonely and they miss their families, especially when families may be thousands of miles apart. And as I mentioned in the study already of the Ten Commandments, the picture of family life that we ought to have isn't one of, I say this knowing that my wife and I just moved 6 months ago, thousands of miles away from our family. So understand that I'm talking about myself here, right? That wasn't the picture back then. Families didn't move thousands of miles away from each other, at least not very often. The picture that we get is that actually 3 and sometimes even 4 generations would be found all under the same roof. And so we have children and parents and grandparents and sometimes even great-grandparents living together. And I know, again, that I'm speaking from a situation where I've never directly dealt with needing to do this. My dad passed away 5 years ago. My mom is only 62. She's in relatively good health and she's doing well. She does live with one of my brothers, so I'm okay there. I'm kind of off the hook, at least for now. But there are certainly situations when a person needs more care than a family can give, right? I don't want to, again, I'm not trying to paint with too broad a stroke here, but I want us as people of God to think very long about what is honoring to our parents who gave us life and who raised us. Because I think how we treat them when they're old says a lot about who we are as people. The truth is, we've given a lot of authority to the government. We've given a lot of authority to these care facilities to take care of those that are really supposed to be under our care. And as adult Christians, we need to examine carefully how we're interpreting this law for ourselves so that we don't just give up our responsibility in handling the fulfilling of this command. And certainly this command also, I think, has in mind how we speak to and interact with our parents. Do we do so lovingly? Right? I mean, if you had a conversation with your own parents this week, did you do that in a loving way? Did you do it respectfully, politely? All of these things do matter. And there may be moments where we don't want to, right? Where our parents upset us, or where maybe you as parents have upset your children. We're going to come to you as parents in a moment. How we treat those closest to us, though, I think helps reveal a lot about who we are, because it says something about then how we might go treat people who aren't closest to us. If we can't even have the kind of respect and honor and love and care for those that ought to be closest to us, how can we do that for those who aren't, for just our neighbor? And Jesus does say to love our neighbor, right? To obey this command makes it more likely that the next generation will treat their parents in a similar way. And I think that's another really important thing to take away from here. Much like how I talked about either last week or the week before with regard to divorce, and how children of divorced parents, statistically they're more likely to be divorced themselves, right, to get a divorce. I think the reverse can also be true. That when you show respect and honor to your parents in front of your children, what are they probably more likely to do as you grow older? They're probably more likely to respect and honor you, are they not? I think this cycle is built on purpose, that God is showing us a way that we ourselves can be taken care of. There is something selfish about this command in one respect, right? If I do this for my parents, maybe my children will want to take care of me when I'm older as well. One of the really cool things that I liked about this command, though, is that it's left open. Right? It's a very open-ended command. Is there any instruction about how one ought to honor one's parents? Well, no, it's left completely open, isn't it? And I think there's a beauty in that. There's something really rich there. The way that one family might honor their parents might look different, might look quite differently from how another family might do the same thing. Because truthfully, God is a God of freedom. I know we're in the midst of law right now in this study, and there are a lot of laws in the Bible, but the truth is that God is a God of freedom, but freedom within certain boundaries, freedom within certain guidelines that we need to follow because they help us structure our lives and our relationships with other people. And as I thought about that this week, because that's not always good news for some people. They don't like the law of the Bible. There are a lot of people, even Christians, that I don't want to deal with all that law stuff. I don't know about that. Here's the way I thought about it. I used this metaphor in my own mind to make it make sense for me. I thought about a river. And the idea of a river that has no boundaries, has no borders, has no structure to it, what does it do? It floods everything, right? And it's no longer a river at that point, is it? What does a river need to know where to go on its course? It needs structure. It needs guidelines. It needs boundaries to help it be a river. It's not a river without those things. I believe that's us. If I'm going to flow in the best way that I can, I need those boundaries. I need those borders. I need those instructions to help me be the river that I need to be. That's one of the ways that it made sense to me. And then also, I think sometimes this command, again, gets used to scare young children. You better obey your parents. Especially because it comes with such a high price. If you look elsewhere, the price of not honoring and obeying your parents is what? Death. You're done for, right? You dishonor your parents, it's over. Sorry, you're only 8, your life's forfeit. Again, I don't really think this is about scaring children. Honor and obedience are not the same thing, okay? And again, if you keep in mind that this law was meant for adults and not children, I think we need to refine how we teach this to children. God didn't have in mind an 8-year-old, and here I'm thinking of my own 8-year-old, that an 8-year-old should just be killed because, well, she didn't want to take out the garbage this week. Sorry, you're done for. Nah, that's not really what's going on here, right? Obedience isn't at the heart of this command. Honor and respect are. I think we need to keep that in mind as we think about it. This is also the first command with a promise. And there are 2 ways to understand this promise. And it seemed like I would look at a commentary and they would go one way with it, and then I'd look at another commentary and they'd go the other way with it. Then I'd go back and I'd look at a third one and they'd go there's a lot of debate back and forth about what this promise really means. Is it an individual promise that you as an individual will have long days, will have extended life? That is one way to think about the command, or the promise as part of the command, rather. The second way is that this was more of a national and Israelite promise, that the Israelites would be able to live long in the promised land if they fulfilled this command. I tend to go that way with it, that it's more of a national kind of promise rather than an individual, although I don't think that's an inappropriate way to read it. But I think the promise here is national rather than individual. The idea is that the duration that the Israelites would be able to live in the land was based on their morality and the fear of God that they expressed in how they lived, and especially in their homes. Were they moral? Were they good, godly people in their homes, teaching their children? In Ezekiel, if you'll turn to Ezekiel 22 for a moment, verse 1, Ezekiel records that the exile in Babylon is actually partly done because of the breaking of this command, as well as others that we've already looked at and others that we will look at. But turn over to Ezekiel, if you will, if you want to. Ezekiel 22, verse 1. We see this. This message came to me from the Lord, Son of man. Once there were 2 sisters who were... Oh, sorry, I'm reading 23. My bad. I can't see this morning, apparently. Now this message came to me from the Lord. Son of man, are you ready to judge Jerusalem? Are you ready to judge the city of murderers? Well, we're about to talk about that. Publicly denounce her detestable sins and give her this message from the sovereign Lord. O city of murderers, doomed and damned, city of idols, filthy and foul, you are guilty because of the blood you have shed. You are defiled because of the idols you have made. Your day of destruction has come. You have reached the end of your years. I will make you an object of mockery throughout the world. O infamous city filled with confusion, you will be mocked by people far and near. Every leader in Israel who lives within your walls is bent on murder. Fathers and mothers are treated with contempt. There it is. Foreigners are forced to pay for protection. Orphans and widows are wronged and oppressed among you. You despise my holy things and violate my Sabbath days of rest. And we talked about Sabbath last week. These are the sins of Jerusalem for which they're taken into exile. Fathers and mothers are treated with contempt. There's something here, something about who we are very deeply that's wrapped up in how we treat our parents. I did want to talk about the role of parenting for a moment because it is vitally connected to what God is saying here. And I think it's important that we talk about this because how parents parent absolutely has something to do with this command. It has to do with it because how you parent often dictates whether your kids are going to be honorable to you or not, whether they're going to honor you and respect you. Are you the kind of parent who has garnered the respect and the honor of your children, not just because I'm a parent and I deserve it? That's how it is. No. Are you a parent who has been respectful to your own children, who has been honoring to them? And I think there is still a way of honoring toward not so good parents as well. I did want to touch on this briefly. And this is a difficult thing to talk about because there are truly terrible parents out there, right? There are abusive parents in multiple forms. There are dismissive parents. There are absent parents. What do we do with situations like that? I don't think I have any revelatory answers. I don't have any great answers. But I think one thing to say is if you're in a situation like that where you have parents like that, is to do your best in those kinds of situations to honor them and to recognize that in them they bear the image of God. Even when it's difficult to see, try to see it. Now, I know, and I want to be clear here, when it comes to things like abuse, I'm not saying that we should sweep those under the rug or forget about them, that if you've been in a situation like that, just forget about that and honor your parents. No, get help immediately. I'm not saying that. The church, and we all know these stories, the church, from the Catholic Church to all kinds of Protestant churches, we have far too often covered up those kinds of situations on behalf of men in particular, but parents at large, of mistreating their children, and I'm not advocating for that at all. But if you find yourself in a situation where it's difficult to honor your parents, try to see the best in them, even if they don't see it in you. I think that's a godly attitude to have. But I want to close this section with looking at Deuteronomy chapter 6. If you'll turn there, Deuteronomy chapter 6, starting in verse 4. I could have gone to anywhere in the New Testament or to several places in the New Testament to talk about this, but I really like Deuteronomy 6. And what's really interesting is there is a direct connection between the law that we're looking at here and Deuteronomy 6, because in Deuteronomy 5, that's where Moses re-gives the Ten Commandments to the Israelites. So it's a very natural place to go, I think. But in Deuteronomy 6, starting in verse 4, let's look there. Almost read from chapter 7. Listen, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength. We know that command, right? We've heard that one a bunch of times. You must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I am giving you today. Okay, we're still good there. Repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you are at home and when you are on the road, when you are going to bed and when you are getting up. Tie them to your hands and wear them on your forehead as reminders. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. You see, I think the command of honoring parents is really supposed to be an easy one. It's supposed to be. If parents are doing the things that God to do. It shouldn't be hard for our children to honor us if we're showing them the right ways to honor. It shouldn't be difficult for our children to have respect for us, not that they're always going to like us, but have respect for us. If we're respectful toward them and show them what respect looks like, who wouldn't want to honor parents like that, right? Parents are supposed to give their children the language of God. Parents are supposed to teach and interpret the laws for their children. So one of the commands that we haven't looked at yet is don't bear false witness. And we're going to come to it. But that is a strictly court scenario kind of law. It's meant for, if you find yourself in court, you don't bear false witness against somebody. You don't lie about something that they have done. But what do we as parents tell our children that law says? Do not lie, right? But that's not exactly what the command says. It says, do not bear false witness, and it's talking about a court scenario. But is it wrong to tell your children, don't lie? Well, of course not. That's at the very heart of what that command is all about, right? That's what we as parents are supposed to do. What children wouldn't want to honor parents that do that for them, that show them what it means to honor God? All right, let's move on to do not murder. I know, this is a big one, right? Well, first off, is it kill or is it murder? Because different translations say different things. Your Bibles may even have footnotes about, well, it really means this, or no, it really means that. I don't have time to summarize the whole debate for you. I'm not going to, because there is a great debate among scholars what's really going on here. What's the difference? How do we nuance each of these? Does it really even matter? And I almost wonder if we've just overthought this command so much in order to justify what we want it to say for us. So, for instance, we believe that a war being waged is just, right? That, yes, that's a just war. Well, how do we know that? Well, it says don't murder, so we can go kill people in war because it says don't murder, right? I'm justifying myself. It says don't murder. Or we believe that the death penalty should be gone, right? Well, it says don't kill. It doesn't say don't murder. It says don't kill. We justify what we want to believe about it. Or we believe that women have the right to choose. It says don't murder, but you can't murder what isn't a person, right? You see how we've done this? How we attempt to make and to twist what we want to understand from it, what we want to see, so that it fits and suits our own purposes. And the truth is that the word translated here can mean murder or kill. I know, sorry. You're just going to have to deal with the ambiguity a little bit longer. I'm not here to clean that up for you. More precisely, what it does mean, though, is it means to stop a person from killing another human being without the permission of the larger community, meaning without the permission of God. That God has given some divinely inspired laws saying, here is when it's okay to do your killing. If they violate these things, otherwise you don't kill other people. It refers to the premeditated taking of the life of another human being. And so it teaches the sanctity, truthfully, of all human life. And so we have questions then like, well, where does abortion fit into this command? Or what about assisted suicide for those with terminal illnesses? Is that okay? And those are important questions. I certainly don't have the time to, kind of lay out all of that before us this morning, but I want to say something about that briefly. That when we think about scenarios like that, about abortion, about assisted suicide, or other sticky situations when it comes to killing or not killing, I think the operating question before all of us ought to be, before us, I'm talking about us, I'm not talking about society at large, I'm talking about us as Christians, the operating question always before us ought to be, regardless of what others may think or do, regardless of what any law allows, how are we as people who belong to Jesus going to live faithfully? That should be the question that goes before us. If God is the author of life through His Son, Jesus Christ, then anywhere life is found, anywhere life is beginning, is being created, there the creative power of God is. And to end any life, even that of an unborn fetus, is very presumptuous of us to do. And I think that's what this law is about. We don't have the right to take life according to our whims. We don't have the right to take life according to our fancies. Life is precious. It is given to us by God, and we are not the ones who get to determine when to end it for other people. And so what do we do with this command? It's kind of simple, isn't it? Well, I think probably the best way to see this is actually in Exodus 21 and verse 12. You may not even need to turn your page if you're actually using a physical Bible, that is. Some of you are on your iPads and stuff. That's good too. I like to hear those pages turning now. It's a sweet sound there. Verse 12 of 21 says, anyone who assaults and kills another person must be put to death. Look also at Numbers 35. Numbers 35 and verse 20, verses 20 and 21. It says, if someone hates another person and pushes him or throws a dangerous object at him and he dies, it is murder. Verse 21, or if someone hates another person and hits him with his fist and he dies, it is murder. That word hate We're going to come to Matthew 5 in just a moment because you probably recognize that's what Jesus talks about, right? What God is saying here is that any act of violence against an individual out of hatred, out of anger, malice, deceit, aggression, or for personal gain, in whatever circumstances, by whatever means, whether intentional or not, that results in death, that's what he's talking about here. That is what is summed up in this command: do not murder, do not kill. The basis of this command is that all life belongs to God. Life is not for humans to do with as we see fit. It is for God to do with. I think the translation kill actually sends us down probably the best path that we need to take as communities of faith, and here's why. Because just translating it as murder, well, anybody in here murder this week? Nope. Good. You're off scot-free, right? No need to think about this command anymore. We're done with it. We can move on, right? I don't think that really does justice to what God is saying here. I think kill takes us to a place of, okay, maybe I didn't directly kill anybody, but did I advocate on behalf of people who do want to kill others? Am I so certain that the things that I believe in are leading to the preservation of life or to the destruction of life? It's easy for us to say, I didn't murder. Sometimes it's harder for us to say, I wasn't involved in killing at all, as sometimes we've gotten wrapped up in cheering on war that maybe doesn't need to be going on, or cheering on the death penalty that maybe doesn't need to happen anymore. I'm throwing out ideas. Translating it as kill it forces us, I think, to re-understand this command for our own times. Because the truth is, the taking of human life, it ought to be very, very rare as anything could possibly be. And Christians ought to be at the forefront of making it rare. We ought to be the ones most staunchly advocating that life in all circumstances is precious and we shouldn't be taking life. We've unfortunately allowed a political organization to co-opt the term pro-life from us as Christians. For Christians, pro-life ought to mean more than just, stop running. My children, stop running. Sorry. I'm a parent. I can't help a parent when I see them doing something. We've unfortunately allowed the term pro-life to be co-opted, to be taken from us, because Christians ought to be the ones advocating for pro-life in all circumstances, not just when it comes to unborn children. But this is, of course, connected to the New Testament. In Matthew chapter 5, that's where we're going to end, in Matthew chapter 5. You've stuck with me this long, thank you. Matthew chapter 5, we're going to look starting in verse 21. This is the words of Jesus. Not my words, not somebody else's words. Jesus. You have heard that our ancestors were told, you must not murder. If you commit murder, you are subject to judgment. But I, Jesus, say, if you are even angry with someone, you are subject to judgment. If you call someone an idiot, you are in danger of being brought before the court. And if you curse someone, you are in danger of Gehenna. So if you are presenting a sacrifice at the altar in the temple, and you suddenly remember that someone has something against you, leave your sacrifice there at the altar. Go and be reconciled to that person, then come and offer your sacrifice to God. When you are on the way to court with your adversary, settle your differences quickly. Otherwise, your accuser may hand you over to the judge, who will hand you over to an officer, and you will be thrown into prison. And if that happens, you surely won't be free again until you have paid the last penny. The truth is, we often look at Jesus' commands here, and we think that they're revolutionary. We think that he's doing just something so crazily different than anything we could find elsewhere. But the truth is, we've already seen this idea of hatred, of anger, being at the roots of killing. Being consumed by those base emotions disables our ability to see in other people the image of God. And that's where we get this idea of killing, of murder. That's what we're meant to see when we look at other people, the image of God. Often we don't see that at all, I think. And if we're going to fulfill this command as God intended, I think we need to think about the ways in which we might mitigate as much killing as possible. Are Christians on the side of those who might die in any circumstance, not just unborn children, although we need to be advocating for that as well, but not to the exclusion of that. So, to conclude today, a few things. First, how are you fulfilling the command yourself to honor your parents? Have you been an honorable child? Are you treating them respectfully and honorably? It's a question that we need to constantly be asking ourselves, I think. Secondly, if you are a parent, are you the kind of parent that your children would want to honor? Don't just make this about your children. Make it about you. Are you the kind of parent that your children would want to honor? And then lastly, what do you need to do to remove anger and hatred from your heart so that it doesn't lead to something worse? And Paul says, don't let the sun set on your anger. Are you letting go of those things that hurt you? Are you letting go of those offenses that bring you down? Or do you let them fester and sit and well up? That leads to murder. Now, I'm not saying any of you are going to be murderers, but that kind of anger, that kind of hatred is exactly what this command is talking about, and that's what Jesus says it's talking about, so I know that's true. Are we going to be those kind of people who let it go and trust in God's timing? Commands 7 and 8 next week. I don't know about you, but I'm really liking this study through the Ten Commandments. Sometimes we think, that's just Old Testament stuff. There's nothing to gain there. There's a lot here. There's a lot of rich material here. I'm glad that you were here this morning. We're going to have a time where we sing a song, and that if you have a need, we want to invite you to come forward. We want to pray with you, baptize you, whatever that is that you need in your life right now, we're here to meet that need.